There was a mail order house. And two very, very bright young students went to the mail order house and sat with the grandmothers as the grandmothers stuffed envelopes. And they loved it. I found out that after summer school was over during the school year, they would go back on Saturday afternoons and stuff envelopes with these women that they had gotten to know so well. Because they were knowing them as people, not as I'm your granddaughter. And they were being treated as equals. And their questions were being answered honestly. Again, the Wednesday afternoon was a marvelous, marvelous thing. Now, we did some other kinesthetic things. We did archery, and the kids had to keep track of their own scores in their head. We had them focus, like a sports thing. We had them focus and almost do an awareness, out-of-body awareness to hit the target, to hit the bullseyes. One of the popular things was we called it take apart. And one of the young men wanted to learn about automobile engines. So we asked any of the parents, is anyone experienced in taking apart automobiles? And one of the students had a grandfather who was a retired auto mechanic. So he went and selected an automobile for us, and we bought it, brought it to the playground, bought all the tools necessary for five to 10 kids at a time to take the engine apart, label everything, lay it out in the manner that you took it apart, and then put it all together. And they'd start it and see if it would run. Then the next class would come, and they'd take it all apart, and they'd put it all together. They'd put new rings on it. They did everything. And this man just loved it. Just loved it. And the kids, of course, and again, not just taking the thing apart, but the idea of organizing your taking apart, that everything has a sequence. Marvelous. Then we had basketball, of course. We had baseball. We had, the sports things. And we talked about visualizing. We had a photo and film class. This is a fairly small class. We had two parents that were college teachers that had their summers free. And they each had 3 or 4 8mm cameras. So they volunteered to teach a photo and a film class. So we had film documentation of all of these activities. Music class, we had experienced children who played instruments already. And so they were taught how to improvise and do jazz from the normal symphony stuff that they had been learning. As a walk-in thing, we had a rhythm band. And we had drums and castanets and sticks and all the rhythm instruments you could think of. And that you could just, if you didn't like your class, if you were bored with it, instead of sitting there and being bored and disrupting everybody, you got up and walked out. And the rhythm band was one place you could go and pick up an instrument and sit down and join in, It was a nice thing. And they would talk about different rhythms. And they would talk about how to build a rhythm. Interesting how she did it. It just occurred to me. She built the idea of rhythm as a counterpoint to your heartbeat. And so you'd listen to your heartbeat, and then you'd start with that, and then you would build rhythms off of that. Very personal, marvelous. And then, of course, there's the journal that I've talked about at the end of the day. Now, if I were doing it again, I would add a couple of things. I would add a class of philosophy and talk about realities. I've counted up, and there are at least 8 realities that we deal with every day. And I'm sure there are more. I would add a class in the power of the mind. And how does the mind work? And can you make things float? Can you make things lighter? You know, can you do all these things that I've been doing? A class in hypnosis. A class in yoga and Tai Chi, where you talk about muscles and bones, and you identify all the muscles and bones. I guess it would be a variation of the Alexander technique of working with the body. And they would learn what muscles do what. This would be a part of the training that I received from my astro friends of touch a muscle, move the muscle. But it would put it into a context of yoga and Tai Chi that they would learn it and use it forever as a strengthening. And for children going through body changes like you go through from 4th grade to 6th grade and 7th grade, what an ideal thing to help them develop the grace and the understanding of their bodies. Extraordinary. Extraordinary. These are the types of things we did, Mel and I, and the other teachers. There were 2 other teachers. There was a Michael, and I can't think of his last name, and there was a woman, Susan Goldsworthy, also, that worked with us in planning all of this. Now, the Indigo child is precocious like I was precocious. They have a thirst for knowledge and understanding. But it's best learned if it's done on their own terms. Most schools then and now, and even more so now, are taught for the convenience of the administrators and the teachers. Now, when you have 30 kids in a class, that means you can talk to each student for 2 minutes during an hour. That doesn't leave much room for one-on-one. And that's where the best learning takes place. Is the teacher on one end of the log and the student on the other.